president on the way to give a State of the Union address, this was not a great headline for that day. Quote, Atlanta Fed shock sounds Trump session warning. The Federal Reserve Bank in Atlanta forecasting yesterday that the U.S. economy, American GDP, is shrinking right now at an annualized rate of 2.8%, minus 2.8%. Now, that is just one forecast. It's an early forecast. But, you know, Trump session is not a great headline for a President Trump on the day of his first big speech. But here's another one from today, the morning after his big speech. Quote, private employers added just 77,000 jobs in February, far below expectations. And again, this is just a forecast, in this case from private industry. We don't get official hiring numbers until the monthly official jobs report comes out the day after tomorrow. But 77,000 is less than half the new jobs that were created last month, and it's half of what Wall Street has been expecting. It's all very worrying economic news, and it comes on top of Wall Street posting its worst loss of the year this week on Monday, when Trump announced that he was going through with his tariff plan on Canada and Mexico and China. Some of those losses in the markets were regained today after Trump had second thoughts and walked some of that back. But barely 6 weeks into this second Trump presidential term, economic indicators are blinking red in response to Trump's action as president. But, you know, they're called economic indicators for a reason. Measurements like these, measurements like the jobs report and GDP and economic growth and all these things, they're supposed to indicate what is going on in the economy. They're supposed to help the public and businesses and policymakers understand what is happening with the economy. What if they could just change those indicators, though? Turn the lights off so they didn't blink at all, red or otherwise. What if they could just change what these numbers mean and whether they indicate anything real about the economy? When I said at the top of the show I had a big warning for you, this is what it's about. Over the weekend on Fox News, Trump's newly appointed Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick floated the idea of changing the way we calculate GDP in this country. Lutnick says he wants to take government spending out of the equation. Just take that out and say that's not part of it, which would, of course, obscure the effects of everything Trump does in government, let alone his top campaign donor who's given free rein to do whatever he wants to the government. It also turns out Elon Musk, the president's top campaign donor, is into this idea. On Friday, he himself posted online that we should change the way we calculate America's economic growth, America's GDP. Never mind the pesky concerns of economists about interference in the federal data. We should just calculate it in a different way, a better way, a way that suits them better. In the category of watching what they do and not what they say, though, here's something that Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has just done. The Wall Street Journal was first to report that Secretary Lutnick has now disbanded 2 advisory committees whose job it is to make sure that the economic data from the federal government are accurate. An expert who worked on one of those now disbanded committees tells the Wall Street Journal that their work, quote, goes to the essential transparency of these statistical agencies. When you remove that transparency, then that diminishes trust. Already just 6 weeks in, Trump has taken a number of actions that have potentially disastrous economic consequences in this country, and in many ways, the country is already feeling it. If they are going to cook the books so that economic indicators like unemployment numbers and economic growth and whether or not we're in a recession or a depression just don't mean anything anymore because they've recalculated them with special Trump numbers, what does that mean for our ability to know the truth about what's going on, and what does it mean for us economically?
How worried should we be about an economy that is slowing in all of this? We saw the GDP last week. Are any of these moves worrying you that we're actually going to see it cut into growth over the near term negatively?
No. So let's The Commerce Department runs the statistics of GDP. They count government spending as part of GDP. So I'm going to separate those two and make it transparent.
Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary asked on Fox News about worrisome new economic indicators, and his response is, don't worry, I control the statistics. I'm going to change those. Joining us now is Jared Bernstein, who was chair of the Council of Economic Advisors under President Joe Biden. Mr. Bernstein, it is nice to see you. Thank you for being here.
A pleasure to be with you.
Is it possible to change the basic statistics we have for the U.S. economy? And what would be the consequences if those data are no longer considered reliable?
Well, it would be possible to do if you took over agencies that would resist you very, very strongly. Some of the most, our agencies, our statistical agencies are staffed by people with tremendous integrity who would fight as hard as they could. But we've seen some of the tactics that this administration uses against such folks. So, of course, it's worrisome. And the consequences, well, you partially outlined them earlier yourself, Rachel, and you were spot on. If you're an investor, a global investor, trying to figure out where our economy is going. If you're a student thinking about an occupation where you might be needed in the future. If you're a local town trying to think about your infrastructure, think about all the trade data we've been talking about over the past few days with that other problem that's going on over there with this budding trade war. All of that information is essential to not just, number crunching nerds like myself, but to the well-being of markets, the country and the people in it. So these folks are, really playing with fire when they suggest manipulating the numbers like that.
The Federal Economic Statistics Advisory Committee, the Bureau of Economic Analysis Advisory Committee, those are impressively boring titles, Jared.
True.
But why would you want to get rid of those things? What is it that entities like that do that the Trump administration might want to do away with? Mr. Lutnick has gotten away with has done away with those committees as of today.
Really important question, because I think once you start thinking about that, you can get worried pretty quickly. First of all, let's be very clear that these committees are typically staffed by volunteers. They cost virtually nothing to run. And for 2 decades, they've been advising our statistical agencies on making their good work even better, improving transparency. And all I can think about is an old adage that says, if you want to control the numbers or the information flow, first get rid of the experts. I have a hard time figuring out why you would chop away at an institution like that again, is virtually costless and provides essential information to keep improving an already really, excellent statistical system. So I don't like what I'm seeing here one bit.
Jared Bernstein, chair of the Council of Economic Advisors under President Joe Biden. Jared, if it is what it seems like it's going to be, I have a feeling we're going to be talking to you about this a lot in the next few days. So stand by, my friend. Thank you. The president, in his, what we believe was ad-libbing, we did not have prepared remarks from the president, which is unusual. The White House is usually distribute prepared remarks, so we don't know what was digression from those remarks and what was ad-lib. But the president did repeatedly seem to be ad-libbing when he was remarking on the expected impact of the economic decisions he's already made 6 weeks in, saying that the American people would have to bear with him, that there would be a little disturbance, that there would be an adjustment period. And again, he said a little disturbance, essentially suggesting that the roiling that we saw in the markets is something that he knows he caused, but he hopes people will not mind. For the record, the worst inflation in this country was in 1980. For the record, the economy that he was left by President Biden was not a catastrophe. It was literally the best economy in the world. It was described by The Economist magazine as the envy of the world. That was the economy that was left to Donald Trump by Joe Biden. For the record, Social Security is not paying benefits in large numbers to 300-year-old people or 250-year-old people or 200-year-old people or 150-year-old people. In fact, the idea of Social Security as a bastion of massive fraud and overpayment is completely false. For the record, U.S. auto company CEOs are not psyched and delighted and so excited about President Trump's economic policies, including his tariffs. Take, for example, the CEO of Ford, Jim Farley, who said that Trump's tariff policies would, quote, blow a hole in the U.S. auto industry that, quote, we've never seen. The president flat out lied about U.S. versus European spending to support what used to be our allies in Ukraine. The U.S. has committed about $125 billion to Ukraine's defense. Europe has committed about $259 billion. The president radically misstating the character and quantity of our relative support for what used to be our ally, now appears to be only Europe's ally and no longer ours. For the record, Joe Biden did not close over 100 power plants. There were more utility-sized power plants up and running in the United States when Joe Biden left office than when he achieved office. For the record, there is no EV mandate. For the record, oil and gas production in the United States hit all-time records under President Joe Biden. For the record, even Doge has never claimed that they have saved hundreds of billions of dollars in savings. The largest items they have claimed to achieve as savings in the U.S. budget have been debunked and they've been taken down, but even they don't falsely claim hundreds of billions of dollars worth of saving. For the record, and this is disgusting, the president made a spectacle out of praising a young man who thus far survived pediatric cancer, as if the president had something to do with that. This was in the midst of him praising Doge. The Doge cuts, among other things, have cut off funding for ongoing research into pediatric cancer. For the record, I will note that Donald Trump did admit in his remarks today explicitly that Elon Musk is the head of Doge. And while that comes as no surprise to anybody who's been following the facts of this matter, that will end up in court because that is directly contrary to what the administration has overtly sworn to a federal judge about the leadership of Doge. I should also note, and this doesn't have to be for the record, I'll just note it for our own experience tonight, that at that point in the speech, when the president talked about how we will no longer be ruled by unelected bureaucrats, Democrats in the chamber pointed and laughed at Elon Musk. Unelected bureaucrat. Nicole Wallace, I'm sorry to dump a lot of fact checks there, and that's not even scratching the surface of the things that need to be fact checked there. That's literally what was off the top of my head. So there's more to say along those lines.
People should know that.